Welcome to another edition of the Watchful Citizen, a public access program brought to you by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. My name is Benny Shope, I'm your host, and today in the studio we have State Senator Danielle Conrad from Legislative District 46.
That's right.
Senator
Hello.
Conrad, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. It's always so nice to catch up with good friends and to have a chance to visit about current events.
It is good to see you again, yes, and you are a good friend of the community and to the county party.
Thank you.
I want to start by asking you some really easy questions. You are a state senator.
That's right, yes.
What does a state senator do?
Sure. Well, I represent North Lincoln's Fightin' 46 Legislative District at the Nebraska Unicameral Legislature, and I'm just beginning to prepare for my 8th year of service in the legislature. It went so quickly. It's hard to believe that it's already here so fast. But what we do is we represent our district and the state as a whole by introducing and enacting legislation that will benefit our citizens. We craft the state budget, which is something I spend a great deal of my time with, serving on the Appropriations Committee.
Talk about that more in a
Yes, good. And then I also serve on the State Retirement Committee and have a personal legislative agenda that we advance each year as well to try and make a positive difference for citizens' lives. So our days are typically filled down at this beautiful state capitol with meeting with constituents and colleagues and reading and research and preparation for floor debate and committee work and attending committee hearings and crafting together our budgetary proposal. So it's always a busy day when it's a legislative day, but it's a fun day too because it's literally something different every day and it's fast moving and it's fun, and the Nebraska legislature is such a special place to serve. I think frequently citizens are so put off by the sometimes crippling partisan dysfunction that has gripped our nation's capital. But at the Nebraska legislature, we operate differently, thankfully, in a nonpartisan manner. And on our best days and most days, it truly is a nonpartisan body. And that allows us to put aside some of those partisan issues and really just focus on good policy and to get to know each other as people, which is critically important when you're trying to build trust and move pieces through the body and work on difficult situations. So it is efficient, it is responsive, and it's a very, very special system that I've been incredibly honored to be a part of.
Well, I'd like to again thank you for your service. You touched on several things that I have more questions about.
Oh, good.
But I'm going to back up just a bit, and you serve as a state senator.
Mm-hmm.
We often think of the state senate, the legislature, as a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
You only work 3 months one year,
Right.
90 days one year, 120 days the next.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yes.
You're only working for 3 months one year, 4 months the next, and the rest
Right.
of the year you're off and do nothing.
Right. So in long session, we work through from about January till June. In short session, which we're preparing for in 2014, we'll work from January till about mid-April. They're 90 and 60 days alternatively. But in the modern era, being a state senator, you're really never off the clock. You're always connected to your citizens through town hall meetings, through door-to-door work, through citizen gatherings, and then of course via phone and email and Facebook and all of those other ways that people can communicate their ideas and opinions. So even though we are citizen legislators and we're paid as such, most of us who aren't retired have other jobs outside of the legislature, myself included. And so when I'm not wearing my state senator hat, I'm the director of a small local nonprofit that supports Parks and Rec programming here in our community. So that's really fun.
You said something that I'm curious. You said when you're not wearing your state legislator hat. Do you ever really get to not wear your state legislator hat?
No. You're really always on duty. Yes,
job?
that's right. You're always on call, so to speak, because you're the representative for about 40,000 citizens. And helping them navigate through state government systems or responding to questions or issues that they might be facing in their life is something that you always need to be attentive to. And thankfully I have staff, as other senators do, to assist with that kind of constituency work. But every morning when you wake up and you're reading the newspaper, that's part of our business. And figuring out what's going on in our state and our community, and talking to other colleagues about what's happening in their districts, and preparing in the interim period for legislation in the next session, attending committee hearings. So even though we're only in session for 6 or 4 months a year, we really do work in a full year-round basis to represent our districts.
As we're getting ready to start the 2014 second session of the 103rd Legislature, I'd like you to go back in time a little bit and talk about the first session, the 120-day session in 2013. I'm going to ask you a tough question. Can you rank how successful that was on a scale of 1 to 10? 10
That's difficult.
Best darn legislature session ever, and 1 being, well, we didn't get where I wanted to be.
Yeah, I'd probably give us about a 6 or a 7. One of the most important things we do as a state legislature, it's a constitutional duty, is to pass our state budget. It's about a $7 billion budget over the 2-year cycle. And we're constitutionally required to do so, and yes, that's right, and we're constitutionally required to pass a balanced budget at that. And we have, and we do in Nebraska. We saw this fall, unfortunately, because of a variety of issues. The federal government actually shut down when grappling with some of these issues, but we don't do that at Nebraska. We come together, we seek consensus, we seek compromise, we pay our bills, and we set forward a strategic vision for our state with that state budget. It really says a lot about what our priorities are. So that was a huge part of our work last session, a huge part of my work from the Appropriations Committee level, and there's so many good things in that budget. I think restoration of funding for education, which had been cut during the economic downturn, and that's right, is critical to our future. We were able to negotiate a tuition freeze with the university and the state colleges to really hold the line on tuition increases and ensure that more working families can access a quality higher education. So those are some very, very exciting aspects tucked within that budget. Not to mention some gains in terms of health and human services and improving our safety net. We also really did a great job in a difficult issue of reforming our state's pension systems to a certain degree, and we made a historic movement to improve and strengthen our teacher retirement plan that will serve us well into the future. And Nebraska consistently ranks at or near the very, very top of all states when it comes to taking care of our long-term retirement obligations. So that's something that Nebraskans can feel very, very proud about, our fiscally responsible and conservative approach that we take with meeting our obligations to hardworking public employees. So that was a hard-fought battle. We moved it through the committee level. We moved it through floor debate. It was vetoed by Governor Heineman, sadly, and we had to come back and do a veto override. And we didn't have 1 vote to spare, but we got it done, and that was a huge victory. Not only because it was fiscally responsible and the right thing to do, but I am probably biased because my mom's a teacher. But I think teachers are pretty darn important to our state and to our community and to our future. And we need to keep our promises to our retirees, and we need to ensure that those partners who are crafting young minds for our futures are paid fairly when they're working and into retirement. So that was a huge victory as well. Why I wouldn't give us a 10 is because we didn't get everything done. Sadly,
what went undone?
What's left undone are a couple big issues.
I want to come back to appropriations when you finish with that question.
Great.
I have some more questions about appropriations.
Great, very good.
So what went undone?
Yeah, a couple of things went undone that I think would have a great positive impact for the state of Nebraska. Right at the top of that list is the Medicaid expansion issue that many states are dealing with in the aftermath of the Affordable Care Act being passed and upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court. But now it's up to each state whether or not they're going to expand eligibility for their Medicaid program so more working families can qualify. And the folks that we're talking about 60,000 Nebraskans who work, aren't going to be able to get a lot of help on the exchanges because of how much they make and their personal situation, and they're not getting health insurance from their employer. And so they're really caught in this donut hole right in the middle. They're making a little bit too much to qualify for Medicaid, but they're not making much to get the help on the subsidy. So that's why Medicaid expansion is a part of the Affordable Care Act, to ensure seamless coverage for everyone. But some states like Nebraska have not yet moved forward on that important topic. And the really disappointing part about this issue is that we have enough votes in the legislature to pass the bill.
Okay.
What we don't have is enough votes to break a filibuster yet.
Yeah. And we'll talk about
Yeah.
that a little bit more too. I'm going to ask you a question about your colleague.
You know, and I think that Medicaid piece, I mean, that's a legacy piece for generations to come. It's our real opportunity as Nebraskans to say to our fellow neighbors and friends and coworkers, these are our family values.
Yes.
This is the moral thing to do. This is the fiscally responsible thing to do, because don't forget for 1 second, the federal government's picking up the tab in its entirety the first few years.
As a federal taxpayer, right?
That's right. And Nebraskans have already paid those taxes, and if we're not willing to draw them back down to our state to help our fellow citizens, plenty of other states sure are, and I think that it's wrong that Nebraskans are happy to pay for health care in California, but not pay for health care for our friends and neighbors here. So it's a workforce issue, it's a family values issue, and you know, in the richest country in the history of the world, we can do better. We can do better than when somebody gets sick, it means a bankruptcy situation or a family falling into dysfunction. We have to strengthen and expand that safety net to include those 60,000 Nebraskans, and to help our rural hospitals, and to help
Yes.
a variety of healthcare providers that are out there providing uncompensated care.
This will take care of it.
That's right.
I want to ask one follow-up question on that one, then
Yeah.
we'll move on a little bit. One of the complaints that I hear, one of the criticisms I hear of expanding Medicare is that the federal government might stop paying for it in the future. It's my understanding from reading the legislature that you did address that and gave us an option to opt out. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. Some opponents of Medicaid expansion, including Governor Heineman and many Republicans in the legislature, have utilized this argument that, well, we don't trust the federal government to keep its promises. And at first blush, that sounds kind of reasonable, particularly when you look at things like special education funding, which has traditionally gone underfunded from our federal partners. But when you start to really dig into that argument a little bit more, I think that there's a couple of things that we need to point out. One, the Medicaid expansion legislation absolutely addresses that. It says, it sets forward very clear thresholds. It says if the federal government fails to keep its promises, we have an opportunity to hit the reset button and to reconsider this decision. But the federal government's been very clear about their willingness to be a strong partner in this effort, and in Medicaid as a whole. They've never let down on their obligation to pay their portion of what we do together to have a strong healthcare system for low-income and disabled and elderly Nebraskans who need it. So I think that it's always good to be skeptical,
Yes.
but I think when
We're for all options.
that's right, when you really dig into it, you can see that there are safeguards in the legislation if that were to happen, but it's very unlikely that it will happen, because the federal government has been a good partner when it comes to Medicaid.
Let's talk about the Appropriations Committee
Yeah.
briefly. You're on the committee. That's one of two committees you mentioned.
That's right.
Do they meet in the interim? First question.
We do. We have interim studies that are conducted when we're not in session, and so we're not meeting quite as frequently as we do during the session, but we do come together to attend to issues that we want to take a look at in greater depth during the interim period, and hold hearings and invite citizens to come in and provide more information. So we've been looking at things like preparing for how to deal with the baby boomers as our state faces,
shift.
that's right, a demographic change coming up. We've looked at things like how can we improve our statewide radio system, which is critical for first
Yes.
responders and
I'm
public
surprised to
safety.
hear that statewide local sheriff's departments and state police use different radios and different
That's right.
frequencies. They often can't communicate with themselves.
It's a very frustrating dynamic, and sadly the state of Nebraska has utilized millions and millions of dollars over a 10 or 14-year period to construct a statewide system to help our first responders, but nobody along the way ensured that our state folks and our local folks were able to talk to each other. And without clear planning and without a vision, with some of those kinds of considerations, now the legislature is forced to come in and again clean up an administrative mess.
So you're with the Appropriations Committee, and I think there are 9 senators?
That's right.
9 senators serving on that, and it's kind of balanced between both political parties. How does an issue like radio frequency usage come to the Appropriations Committee, and then how does it get to the floor?
Sure.
Explain the process briefly.
Yeah.
What happens. And I also want to know, how can I as a citizen affect that Appropriations Committee process?
Great, those are great questions. You're right, our committee is widely considered to be one of the most powerful committees in the legislature because really anything with a price tag has to move through our committee. And so it's unique in the fact that there are 9 members. Most of the other committees have 7 or 8 members, but we have 3 members from each roughly congressional district.
Okay.
And so it ensures geographic balance, and then of course we run and serve in a nonpartisan manner, but we also have diversity in terms of political philosophy. There's some of the more progressive members like myself on the committee, and there's some of the more conservative members like some of my colleagues who serve on the Appropriations Committee, and I really think that that's wonderful.
I like the fact that this is something I want to stress. It's very representative, 3 from each congressional district, and
That's
it's
right.
balanced as far as ideology goes.
That's right, that's right.
That's
And
something we don't hear a lot of.
No, we don't. And I'm so thankful to have Senator Bowles on board. She just joined us recently because for 6 years of my career, I was the only woman on the Appropriations Committee. So it's nice to have another senator who brings a different perspective on board, absolutely. But what it really forces us to do with that diversity of perspective is to have hard-fought battles, and believe me, we do, but really to continue to seek consensus and compromise and find the middle, to put aside the extremes from both sides of partisan politics and always work towards the middle, where most of the citizens are and where most of good policy is. So it's an awesome system that serves us well. To answer your question, with something like the statewide radio system, this came up as a part of different agency budgets. The State Patrol, Game and Parks, Public Power, and some other folks, the Fire Marshal, who have an interest in public safety. Yes. That's right. So as part of their budget hearings, we'd hear about their needs to improve this system. And it became very apparent to our committee that there were incredible deficiencies with the system, and we needed to right the ship and make some investments to ensure that we had a safe and reliable system for our first responders and our citizens. So we've continued to dig in, work with consultants, work with citizens, work with law enforcement to get more information about what went wrong and how we can fix it. So we'll continue to work on that next session and to make some improvements. How can everyday citizens get involved in the process? That's an awesome question. You can always come down and testify on a hearing, at a budgetary hearing, on a bill, or as part of a larger agency issue. Anytime you would like to. We always welcome citizen testimony, but sometimes it's really hard for folks to get off of work and come to the legislature or follow when the hearings are coming up. So it's always a good idea, if you feel strongly about an issue, to reach out to your senator. And the best way to communicate your viewpoint is a very simple and direct personal statement. Dear Senator Conrad, I feel really strongly about increased funding for child welfare because I think that our foster kids deserve a little bit more. That kind of simple, sincere, straightforward message coming from a constituent is literally the most powerful communication that exists in our democratic system. It's true, it's true. And if you don't have time to put together something on your own, forwarding an email from an interest group or something like that you follow is better than nothing. But really just making that very simple, straightforward communication, whether it's by phone call or an email message or a handwritten letter, that's powerful. It moves policymakers, more so than lobbyists, more so than big checks from big donors, because that's what we're meant to
That
do.
is the
That's who
representative
we
part of
represent.
representative government.
Absolutely. And so people think, oh, one person can't make a difference. That's absolutely wrong. They can make a difference, and indeed, that's what does make the difference on most of these issues.
Let me ask you a question about that. That one heartfelt statement, I feel strongly about this. I want you to support it,
That's right.
or maybe even oppose it.
Right. That's right.
Do you delineate between me walking into your office, me calling your office, or me sending you an email?
Right.
Does that make a difference to you? Does one weigh more than another?
You know, to me personally, no, because I, as a mom with 2 jobs, I appreciate how busy schedules go. So if people can take the time to communicate however it's best for them, that's fine for me. Different senators have different styles, and maybe a personal visit sometimes does weigh a little bit more heavily. But again, any sort of personal communication is going to carry great weight. And I have some colleagues that literally decide how to vote dependent upon how many people call in for or against something. I don't operate that way, but I do look at it. I do look at it as one factor when I'm coming to a decision about how to vote.
I would hope it'd make you consider the issue
That's
a
right.
second time, or maybe a
That's
third.
absolutely right. Yeah.
I want to go back to something you talked about earlier about the passing the expansion. And you were concerned there was not enough votes to defeat a filibuster. The legislature is a diverse body. We have several political ideologies represented.
That's right.
Even within a political party,
That's
there are
right.
different ideologies represented. How well does it work? Do you work with your colleagues? We would say commonly across the aisle, different parties, but there has to be consensus and coalition building.
That's right.
How does that work, and how do you feel? I want you to rate it. I don't want to know if there are people you can work with or can't work
Sure.
with, but you're always having to build temporary alliances with people.
Absolutely. You know, it takes 25 senators to pass any bill,
That's good to
30 to override a gubernatorial veto, and 33 to break a filibuster. And that 25, that 30, and that 33 is cobbled together in a variety of different ways. And again, I think it's a real strength of our system. It forces people to work together, to move beyond geography, to move beyond partisan differences, to move beyond personal background, and to constantly find where the majority is, and to build alliance and build consensus and seek amendments if need be to bring more folks on board. And that's exactly what Senator Jeremy Nordquist and Kathy Campbell have been doing over the interim period to kind of reformulate what Medicaid expansion might look like next year. And they've been looking very hard at other state options that are out there that might include premium assistance in the private marketplace to help the same group of people. These are approaches Iowa has taken, and approaches that Arkansas has taken. So they're putting the final touches on what the new bill will look like next year, but it's part of that process of building alliances and building consensus. And some more moderate members have a stronger faith in a more private market-based approach rather than a government approach, which would be simply through Medicaid expansion. Now, it's a little bit more expensive to go that way, and it's not quite as efficient, but if it helps to provide health care access to those 60,000 working Nebraskans, we have to look at it very hard.
I want you to say that again. 60,000. What I hear
That's
is
right.
poor people, deadbeats, lazy folks. That's not what you said. You said
No.
60,000 working Nebraskans.
That's exactly right.
People who go to work every day
That's right.
and just have a little trouble paying for health care.
That's absolutely right, yes. And whether people want to call them the 47% or takers or whatever sort of rhetoric they want to utilize, they're dead wrong. These are our friends and neighbors who are working for a living. If they weren't working at all, they would probably qualify for Medicaid as it is today in many instances. But these are folks literally who are working hard, sometimes 2 jobs with no benefits, mainly minimum wage jobs in many respects, or for small businesses who aren't able to provide health care to their employees in some instances. So the Affordable Care Act is an important tool to help level the playing field for small businesses and to help working families succeed, just by saying, hey, when you're working hard and you're playing by the rules, we're going to ensure that you can get access to basic health care.
Affordable health care.
That's right.
Yeah. You talked about so many wonderful things. There are thousands of things I want to ask you.
It always goes so fast,
does
doesn't
go
it?
quite
Yeah.
fast. You talked briefly about people reaching your office. I want to ask you a question, though, that Norm Wallman was on the show recently, and I asked him, do you consider yourself an urban senator or a rural senator, since he represents two districts?
He does, yes.
Do you consider yourself an urban senator, representing the urban population?
Right. I consider myself a state senator. I represent North Lincoln, which is one of the most urban districts in the state, but I hail from a very rural community. I grew up in rural Seward County, so those roots are forever in my head and in my heart as well. But I have to, at the end of the day, always do what's best for the state and all of the citizens. Of course, we represent our districts, and we have to be responsive to their concerns. And the concerns in North Lincoln are sometimes very different than the concerns in Scottsbluff. And it's my job to be an advocate for those concerns and to share that story with my colleagues. But at the end of the day, when I decide how to cast a vote or am making a difficult decision, what's always at the forefront of my mind is what's best for Nebraska. And I think most senators operate in the same manner, and that's why we usually have pretty good policy come out of the Nebraska legislature.
So quickly, we're kind of short on time, but what else do you expect to come before the legislature? We talk about expansion of Medicare.
Right.
What other big things do you think we'll face?
Yeah. I think next year 2014 is going to be jam-packed. It's a short session. Yes. There's 17 of us on our way out the door because of term limits. And so people are really looking for that last hurrah, that legacy. The governor's last year in office as well after a 10-year stint there. So there's a lot of pressure to get a lot done in a very short period of time. But I think the issues that you'll see and hear a lot about will be some final budgetary adjustments, which we always have in the second year. Prison reform is going to be a huge issue where, again, the legislature is going to have to come in and put together a responsible plan to deal with public safety and community corrections because the governor has failed to act in a responsible way. That's going to be a huge issue. Senator Lathrop and Ashford and Mello are leading the charge on that and doing a great job. Medicaid expansion is going to be huge. That's another issue we're going to look at hard against. Thankfully, Senator Campbell and Nordquist are leading the way on that. And then we have a variety of proposals that we'll see on taxes. The state legislature just completed a year-long interim study, really, where they crisscrossed the state and heard from citizens in every corner about our revenue infrastructure. And they've put forward a plan or some recommendations for potential improvements to our infrastructure, our revenue infrastructure. Overall, I think they're very reasonable and responsive ideas, but I also want my colleagues to consider very strongly the fact that while there's always room for improvement, our current system's serving us pretty well. We're consistently ranked as one of the best places to raise a family and to start a business, and revenues are strong, allowing us to. That's right. Things are in place. That's absolutely right. So I know taxes are always a big issue, but we do have some obligations and investments we need to look at, and something that I'm going to be working very hard on as a continuation from last session is moving forward with a bill that says you cannot be fired because of who you are and who you love. It's a huge issue for so many citizens, and the momentum is so strong right now that I think the time is right.
This is horrible. I would love to expand on that question, but we're out of time.
I know we are.
Would it be possible? Can you come back again?
Absolutely.
And talk about that?
Yes.
That would be wonderful.
That'd be great. Yes. Thank you so much, Benny.
And I'd like to thank you for watching another edition of The Watchful Citizen, a local cable access program brought to you by the Lancaster County Democratic Party. Our show airs on Time Warner Public Access and can also be seen on our Lancaster County Democrat YouTube channel. It airs on the cable access channel on Tuesday nights at 10:30, Wednesdays at 6 p.m., and Saturdays at 12:30. My name is Benny Shope. I'm your host. Our guest, Senator Danielle Conrad, has been wonderful, and we hope you'll tune in again for the next episode of The Watchful Citizen.